Today, Bill Shorten, Graham, has laid out his foreign policy agenda in a speech at the Lowy Institute. I was making the point earlier, I don't know if they change a lot of votes, foreign policy speeches, but they are important to get a sense of, who would be Prime Minister and what sort of view they have, worldview they have. What did you make of his focus on the Pacific in particular?
Well, I think we have to do the lot. We have to, look at Indonesia, we have to look at China, look at the US, look at Europe, and we have to look at the Pacific because they're next door to us. Look, I thought it was orthodox. I didn't think there was anything particularly wrong with it. I don't know about the bank idea. If we are giving money to the Pacific Islanders, I want my elected representatives, the PM, the Finance Minister and the Foreign Minister, even if it is Penny Wong, making sure that it's spent properly and not some bank manager. It's amazing the influence one can have in the Pacific. And the Foreign Minister, even if it is Penny Wong, making sure that it's spent properly and not some bank manager. It's amazing the influence one can have in the Pacific. One of the biggest influences at the moment is rugby league. The rugby league links with Fiji and Tonga and Samoa is fantastic. And I think a lot more can be made of that sort of diplomacy. But look, Minister Shorten's stuff was orthodox, it was sensible. It's not going to hurt.
No, it's not going to hurt. Look, Ben, this is all about, not all about, but it's largely about right now the strategic competition with China in the Pacific as well, and making Australia the destination of choice for investment. I'm sure a lot of Pacific nations, desperate for money, are pretty happy to take it from wherever it comes. But do you think Bill Shorten's ideas position Australia well to, be the investor of choice rather than China?
Well, of course, that is the big strategic risk and opportunity that Australia faces dealing with China and the China-US relationship. And it's important to have good relationships with the Pacific. And I think the government's been a bit under pressure. That Melissa Price's performance with former Kiribati President Tong, I don't think went down well. So doing more in the Pacific, whether it's rugby league or things like this, are important. I actually was very interested in this speech. I thought the pitch about a new infrastructure bank for the Pacific was very interesting. I've just come from a impact investment conference in San Francisco, and a lot of people there were talking about the fact that when Australia aid program can only give grants, and it can't give concessional loans, and it's locking out the ability of impact investors to get on board. And of course, this is essentially that. It's essentially like the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, which is doing work in concessional loans in the renewable energy and clean energy industry, but having such a bank for the Pacific. And I actually think it might spark a wider discussion about such facilities beyond the Pacific. And I think it's a very interesting policy development that I'm looking forward to getting into, actually.
Well, it is interesting.
You've got to be really careful here. There have been over the years some magnificent leaders in the Pacific. There's also been some grubs. And I reckon no matter what we do, they will continue to take money from China and money from us. And there's nothing much we can do about that. But I think we have to be very careful. One way of doing it is simply to make sure that the NGOs and whatnot get the money and they use it well. But every now and again, there's a couple of these leaders pop up and they pocket more of the money than they do.
Yeah, and look, it is an interesting debate that Ben points to there about how our aid money is spent. Do we decide which projects are going to go ahead and which ones are a waste of time and money? Or do we hand over some of that decision-making to these Pacific nations? It does get into a tricky area.
I still like strings attached.
Well, I'm not saying there shouldn't be strings attached, but I think it's going to allow actually to leverage Australia's funds further. It's going to allow business in. It's going to allow businesses in who might want to do some good in the region, impact investors to potentially co-invest. I think it's an interesting policy development. As I said, a lot of people in the impact investment industry have been saying it's too limiting just to be giving grants. We need to be giving concessional loans as well, and this is opening up that space.
Look, just a final issue. I know that the Telegraph followed up on this story that the ABC had a little while ago about white supremacists or people with links to white supremacists infiltrating the National Party. A whole bunch of them recruited over the last 12 months and a whole bunch of them being kicked out now by the New South Wales director of the National Party. Graham, what's going on here? Is there a rise, do you think, in this sort of white supremacist thinking and movement in Australia right now? And the US. I mean, look what happened in Pennsylvania over the weekend.
A bit of a modern flow on from the American stuff. But look, it happened a long time ago. We had the League of Rights try to take over the National Party when I think Doug Anthony was the leader.
Right.
And he made sure that there are enough numbers to get rid of the mongrels. And it's got to be the same here. The State Director in New South Wales is right. He weeds out the mongrels, and then you make sure that in particular branches you have enough support to get rid of these people. It's it's hard.
And it makes the job, I guess, a little harder for party directors, Ben, too, doesn't it? They're going to have to monitor, Facebook links that people have got amongst the membership, because this becomes a big problem, doesn't it, when you've got a whole batch of people who've got these sort of connections?
Yeah, it's a real problem for political parties having struggling to inject normal people, if you like, into their membership, and membership of all political parties is declining. It's hard for people to get involved. Political parties need to find new...
sort of thing.
Exactly, and political parties need to find new ways of encouraging the average person to get involved, not the kind of crazies. And congratulations to the Nationals for kicking them out and finding them, and Background Briefing and the Telegraph for pursuing and finding them. You asked at the beginning whether it's a start of a trend and the rise of...
And then you make sure that in particular branches you have enough support to get rid of these people. It's it's hard. And
it makes the job, I guess, a little harder for party directors, Ben, too, doesn't it? They're going to have to monitor, Facebook links that people have got amongst the membership, because this becomes a big problem, doesn't it, when you've got a whole batch of people who've got these sort of connections.